I'd like to call to order the meeting of the June 20th, 2018 Frederick County Planning Commission. This time, I'd like to everyone join me in a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Our first item tonight is the approval of our agenda. If there's no changes to the agenda tonight, Mr. Secretary, hearing none, I ask for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Megan, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is approval of our minutes from the May 2nd, 2018 meeting. If they're all in favor of how they read, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item is our committee reports. First report is from Mr. Unger on Frederick Water.
Yes, sir. We met Tuesday evening, yesterday. There's been a lot of new residential growth in Lake Frederick development, and it's thriving very well. And they're trying to get a water tank put up down there. They haven't, as of yet, got the land location from Lake Frederick to do it, so it's holding up a lot of things, and I don't know something's going to happen soon because they're going to run out of pressure down there if we don't get a tank and stuff set up down there. And we've had that approved since 2001, and it still hasn't been given to us to where we put a water tank up at, so hopefully that'll get resolved soon so that everything can continue to move smooth down there. Customer base right now is over 15,700 connections. Monthly water production is 5.74 million gallons per day. And we're getting about equal amount from the two quarries, North Quarry and Stevens City. And the same from Winchester. It's being divided fairly equally. The Stevens City Deal Quarry, there's two of them we pump out of down there. The North Quarry has increased about 14 feet since this past rain. Don't have all the other quarry, believe it or not, has gone over 35 feet since this last rain, so we should have plenty of water for the summer coming up. They're both about 2/3 full right now, so hopefully everything will be good. Clearbrook Quarry rose about 2 feet, which that quarry doesn't fluctuate like the Stevens City Quarry, but it's in real good shape. And that's all we got.
Appreciate it. The next report I have will be the Winchester Planning Commission Liaison, Commissioner Wolf.
Hello, thank you. We had our regular work meeting yesterday, June 19th, and we had one item which we forwarded to council with recommendation for approval, which was an ordinance to rezone 0.12 acres at North Kent Street and a portion of 214 East Piccadilly Street from residential business to central business district.
All right, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
The last of our reports, committee reports, is our Board of Supervisor Liaison, Supervisor Trout.
Good evening. So at our last Wednesday, June 13th, Board of Supervisors meeting, we had a public hearing scheduled for rezoning for 05-17, which was the Carmoose Lime and Stone, and we actually postponed that until our July meeting. We also had an approval, we approved the draft update for the interstate road improvement plans. That also included the secondary roads as well. And then we had a discussion about the ordinance amendment concerning buffers and parking for, it's 165 zoning, which basically we decided to keep the ordinance as is.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I'll make one note before moving on to citizen comments. Mr. Triplett has agreed to stay on in the conservation easement capacity representing the board there. I know he's not with us tonight, but thank you, Mr. Triplett. And so that if I have missed any committee reports, seeing none, I'll move on to open citizen comment portion. Any citizens here would like to speak before us tonight that has not, for an item that's not on the agenda, this is your time to come forward, talk to us, and we'll talk back. So, not seeing none, I'll close the citizen comment portion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll recuse myself for the next item.
Thank you, sir. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing item. It's for conditional use permit number 08-18 for Trailer Drop LLC, submitted by Gray Wolf, Inc. for tractor truck and tractor truck trailer parking use as a conditional use in the M1 Light Industrial District. The property is in Stonewall Industrial Park at the end of McGee Road, Route 861, Winchester, Virginia. Is identified with property identification number 4319-64 in the Stonewall Mesh Jail District. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the commission, if I could turn your attention to the map on your left, gives you a layout of the property. As Mr. Chairman, you pointed out, it's currently zoned M1. It is vacant. The property is surrounded by M1 uses, which are industrial, and RA properties which are used as agricultural. The zoning ordinance allows for tractor truck and tractor truck trailer parking as a conditional use in the M1 zoning district with an approved conditional use permit. We amended our ordinance, I think it was a year and a half, maybe 2 years back. So this is actually the first one of these conditional use permits before you. So this is sort of new, if you will. However, the Northeast Land Use Plan and the Eastern Road Plan, the Comprehensive Policy Plan, depicts future Route 37 on the western boundary of this property. And if I could, again, I'm going to show you the map. What's highlighted in the red there is what our boundaries on the western boundary of this property for where the future Route 37 is to be located. This is a sort of, if you want to kind of a zoom in, that the applicant sent in a drawing. It's showing the layout. Now, this is not a site plan. I'll get that part of the conditions because a site plan is required for this use. This is also, he depicted, or that applicant has depicted where the future Route 37 will be. Give you an idea that it is on the map, as this board is well aware of, or this commission, and the board is, when it goes to the Board of Supervisors, staff always at this part of 37 does show it, depicted on either a site plan, master plans, or any rezonings. The goal of the area plan and the Eastern Road Plan is for the implementation of Route 37. The zoning ordinance addresses a CUP as a land use action. As any land use action with the goals of comprehensive policy plan, it should be implemented. Staff notes that the application does not provide for an acquisition of future Route 37 right-of-way. Should the Planning Commission find this use to be appropriate, staff would recommend the following conditions be assigned to this conditional use permit. 1, all review agency comments and requirements shall be complied with at all times. Number 2, the future site plan for this property shall be designed to accommodate the future Route 37 right-of-way. Number 3, the site shall meet the requirements of the Frederick County Zoning Ordinance, Section 165-204, TAC 24, tractor trailer and truck trailer parking. That part of the ordinance has additional conditions. As you know, as a conditional use permit, you have to follow all agency requirements and conditions assigned to that. That's why staff did not put those, I think there's 8 conditions there. On top of it, the applicant would have to follow that. And of course, any expansion or change of use will require a new conditional use permit. For the record, Mr. Tim Stowe is representing this application, and I'll answer any questions that you or any of the commissioners may have on this conditional use permit. Thank you.
Commissioners, questions for Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir, Mr. Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, if you would put back up the site plan that shows all of the red lines on it, that one. Those are all potential locations of 37. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Do we have a probable location of 37 through?
That's out of your comprehensive policy plan right there. That's the whole right-of-way for Route 37.
Mr. Chairman, if I may help clarify that. What you see on the map is all the line work associated with Route 37. So it's not different alignments, if you will, of 37. However, it's different components, if you will, outside right-of-way, lanes, things of that nature.
Okay, that helps explain it a little bit.
You're welcome.
This land is already rezoned, so he could by right, the owner of the property could by right build a building there.
Right.
Without even coming to the county, is that correct?
That is correct. However, as you're well aware of, and the reason I say that, any site plan that, yes, short answer. However, both boards, the Planning Commission, the Board of Supervisors, does review site plans. The applicant could put a building in that right-of-way because we don't have the right-of-way. This land use action, you're correct, it's M1 today, so if he wants to put a warehouse up today, a building, an office building, yes, he could do that.
what legal basis, or I know our legal basis would be the comp plan, but what would be our probability of surviving a court appeal by using the comp plan as a reason to not approve a building or something else on that?
Because as a building, we've already been through that at this board and through the years, and this industrial park, as you recall. However, your question more to the land use, because this is a land use action, that's where your comp plan, that's your basis for either approving, adding the condition, disapproving the conditional use permit. I would believe that with our comp plan does call that out in our Northeast land use plan. It has been on our plan for the last how many years. So yes, I think there wouldn't be an issue at all, legal-wise. But anyway, it's just hard to go from there.
Okay. I'm just trying to think this through, so I'm asking questions to think it through better. I guess I'm looking at this in a gravel parking lot for tractor trailers or to park anything, and that's what the parking lot's going to be, correct? Gravel?
That is correct.
So there's no permanent implement there, nothing that would be in the way to building Route 37. I mean, 6 or 12 inches of gravel is easy to remove, much easier than part of a building, to remove in the future if 37 is built, and this is built as a parking lot, than having a building or something else there. Now, I guess that would increase, since there's no easement on the property, we don't own, Frederick County has no easement, no ability to get an easement without the property owner giving it to us. So this would increase the value of the property that the county had to pay, or the state had to pay to get the easement. Would that be a fair assumption?
That would be a fair assumption. However, if I can go back to these conditions to answer one of your questions about the site plan, and I think that's a good point. We had the site plan for this property should be designed to accommodate any future right-of-way. So with the applicant, I'm going to go back to the sketch plan, if you will, for the applicant is sent in. Again, part of that conditions that was added through the Frederick County zoning ordinance requires that you have to have a site plan approved. Okay? If you go back to the condition number 2, the site plan for this property shall be designed to accommodate the future Route 37 right-of-way. What the applicant has submitted here, in a short answer for you, Mr. Thomas, is would have to probably move some of that out of that proposed right-of-way. Now, obviously, through the conditional use permit, if a body or the other body felt that they wanted 37 to be there as in place today, forever, I don't want to say forever, but let's say forever today, right away, then one of the conditions could be put on this conditional use permit that the Route 37 right away is depicted in our comprehensive policy plan, be part of this conditional use permit.
Or if that would be objectionable the other way, maybe it would be that at the time when 37 is going to be built, that easement be dedicated to the county.
We could probably craft it to a condition that would satisfy whatever this commission or board would look at. Yes,
Worst
sir.
case scenario, he could lose 6 parking spots. The applicant could.
With the site plan comes in, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Ruddy?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If we could perhaps add a little bit of clarity to that condition with regards to the right-of-way. The county attorney is here with me and probably would like to add a little bit of something that hopefully clarifies that discussion that was just held.
Yes, and I'm the assistant county attorney. I'm not Mr. Williams, who's not with us this evening. We, as the legal team, do believe that the better course that's consistent with the applicable law that's developed is that we not make it a condition of the CUP that Route 37 be dedicated.
Can I ask why?
We're not sure that it would survive the challenge if we were to do so. Ultimately, that is the legislative body's decision, but Mr. Williams did review the plan and asked that I communicate that position.
Yeah, I guess I'm really confused on that because we think that we could survive a court challenge of not allowing him to build anything in that area.
It's
but
my
we couldn't
understanding.
survive a challenge of asking for the property to be dedicated at a future time? I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry. You don't have to
Yes.
answer that.
I apologize.
No, I apologize for
And-
asking it.
And I'm not sure, I'm not sure if Mr. Williams has weighed in on the first part of that inquiry, whether we would survive a challenge on building a building within the right-of-way, on not approving a plan for a building within the right-of-way that hasn't been dedicated.
If I may, I think what I've heard is, and I think I've read this correctly, we're not following our comprehensive plan. That's our go-to. I mean, and when we venture away from that on this one as differ from the other ones we've had before with similar situations like this, we create tricky situations for all concerned. So when I underlined some lines that said, this CUP shall implement the policies expressed in the comprehensive plan. And it says a lot in that first little missive there, in particular addressing the future 37, which is a feature of the county's Eastern Road Plan. When I go down to item number 2 and I see the word accommodate, that's a very vague statement, I guess. It says to accommodate, not provide for.
Yes, I would agree with that interpretation, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So then, when I trail on down, and forgive me for doing all the talking here, but after item 4, relative to the comprehensive plan, staff notes that the conditions do not otherwise provide for the acquisition of future 37 right-of-way. That was the one I'd like, is that some explanation? Is that, I don't want to put you on the spot either. Is that Mr. Ruddy can chime in on that one, or?
Yeah, I think the advice of the county attorney in that particular situation was to truly recognize the importance of Route 37, recognize that there is the opportunity for the right-of-way to be shown on the site plan, and then perhaps should the applicant so choose, then there's the ability for that to be a component of a condition. The preferable way would be to recognize 37, ensure that all site improvements are outside of that right-of-way, and condition number 2 appears to do that, but while at the same time recognizing that this is perhaps a temporary use, a conditional use within the industrial district. So that might be the balance that you're seeking right there.
Okay. Thank you. Any other commissioners? Questions, comments?
I guess I'm like you, Kevin. It looks like number 2, the last sentence below number 4 kind of, I don't know, they don't look like they go together to me for some reason.
Ms. Dawson?
This maybe isn't exactly on topic, but I was wondering about the traffic, because I drove there. It's at the very, very end of the development. So all of it's going to be going the whole length, back and forth.
Is that a question you have for Mr.
Well,
Sharon? or-
if that's something he
The
can
applicant?
address.
Yeah, I asked Ms. Dawson, is part of the site plan process, if a TIA is warranted, that will come at the site plan stage. Should the CUP get approved, we can require either a TIA or any other traffic issues there. One of the other issues, like I said, with the site plan, it's reviewed by the Virginia Department of Transportation, other agencies, if you've seen before through a rezoning.
Okay. Well, great.
I guess just the way that this thing is being presented to us with a parking lot, I don't see a problem with it, other than the fact that you might have to move some stone someday, so, it's a big deal. I don't know, I don't see a problem with doing what's being requested if that's all's involved.
I'll let someone else maybe answer that, but I think the biggest thing we see is just we don't have the right-of-way. We just don't have that 37 being recognized on this plan.
Number 2 kind of says that, I think.
I'll have to let someone else answer that. Mr. Chairman,
It answers Mr. Unger's question. Yeah, the site plan shall be designed to accommodate the future Route 37 right-of-way, so not to encumbrance it and things of that nature. Again, as you said, Mr. Unger, yeah, it's going to be gravel, so that's where we're at.
Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, that's the concern I have. We're setting a precedent by allowing development in the right-of-way. And that's a dangerous precedent to set when we have a comprehensive plan that specifies what should and shouldn't go in certain areas. But I agree with the comment that all we're talking about is gravel. I'd much rather see gravel in there than a building in there. Gravel, I can make the argument, if I was standing up in front to make an argument, I could make an argument that accommodates the future Route 37. There's nothing there that interferes with 37 being built in the future. Because whether you take a dozer and blade up topsoil or blade up some 12 inches of aggregate, dozer's not going to know the difference. And they're going to have to do one or the other. So I'm really, I don't want to set the precedent, though, of us endorsing development in areas where the comprehensive plan said it shouldn't be developed. But then part of me could make the argument that this really isn't development. So I'm really torn on this one.
I hear what you're saying, and I think we all are, in the fact that our comprehensive plan clearly states that Route 37 is a part, and we a dedicated right-of-way. That I think that's what we have to keep going back to. How we get into the nuts and bolts and what we say in construction is the ways and means of construction. Maybe we should not do that. We need to address what we are looking at here, and does this accommodate what the comprehensive plan is asking us to do? Is there a dedication that we're seeing here for the right-of-way for Route 37 in the future? And I'm not certain I see that wording in here with enough gravitas to make me say, yes, that's here. And that's my biggest consternation, not to impart my will on anyone, but it doesn't seem like to me that it has the hook that we've seen in other applications that we come in either for conditional use permits or rezoning. So I think that's where I come from a little bit, is that the 37, like a dedication of that land is not there. Yes, you're right. I don't disagree with you on pushing dirt's a lot easier than pushing buildings away and purchase them and what have you, but that's where I'm at on that. So, is anyone else?
Kevin, not to make an argument, but then what does number 2 mean? That's what it sounds like to me. We're going to put gravel in there. Guy's got 5 acres of ground he wants to put park trailers on. God knows when 37 will go in. Are we going to hold him captive for 20 years till it does go in? I mean, it's being worded on number 2 that it's going in there. I think.
That's a question for Mr. Ruddy or Mr. Chairman. There, the word accommodate is a different wording there. I'll agree.
I would suggest that the Planning Commission is clear on what they interpret that condition to be. As Mark, Mr. Chairman, had discussed, that the accommodation for the 37 right-of-way should be recognized, and the site improvements should be outside of that right-of-way. So the picture that is shown on the plan that was submitted has it within the right-of-way. So if the Planning Commission's intent in their condition would be that the improvements are wholly outside of that right-of-way, then that's a fair statement that could be made in that condition.
Okay.
Obviously, it is not the dedication, but recognizing that all site improvements are outside of that right-of-way may again help us move it forward. But if it's the intention of the commission that those improvements be enabled as depicted on the picture that was provided, then just understand that that is what the Planning Commission is so enabling.
Thank you. Mr. Unger.
Just sitting here thinking about this piece of property, somebody could put a building in there now, I would think. I think we're being blessed that it's being turned into a parking lot, and, somebody's not coming here to put a building in. At least, it's They're gonna park trucks in there, so what?
Granted. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the applicant like to come forward, please?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I'm Tim Stowe, representing the applicant this evening. You've made all my arguments for me. Mr. Thomas was very eloquent at it. This is a gravel parking lot, and that's all it is. It will not impede the development of Route 37 for the reasons that have already been cited. The dozer can go through gravel as easily as it can topsoil. Rock gives it a little more challenge, but we don't see this as an impedance to Route 37 development whenever that might occur. The owner received comments from the planning staff on Friday, and the intention of accommodating Route 37 was not clear to us either. It looks kind of fuzzy, and we felt like we needed more clarity on item number 2 that Mr. Chairman referred to. What we would respectfully request is that item 2 read that the site plan for the property show the future Route 37 right-of-way line. That it be clear where that right-of-way is planned, and that there not be any confusion about what that's going to be. The drawing that you received is a sketch plan to accommodate accompany the CUP. Obviously, a site plan would need to be prepared for this project with the details that would be required by the planning staff for that. It takes a piece, this project takes a piece of land and provides a need there in the industrial park. There's lots of tractor-trailer traffic out there, as Ms. Dawson alluded to. And a lot of times those guys park where they're not supposed to. And this is going to give them a place to park. So there's a need for this that'll benefit folks in the Stonewall Industrial Park, and respectfully request your positive recommendation. And I'll be glad to answer any questions that I might.
Mr. Thomas?
Again, I'll just throw out a thought. Would you and the applicant be willing to put on the site plan a line, as you show here on this one, it shows future dedication of Route 37, no vertical development will occur in this zone?
I think that's the intent, so I would say yes. That the intent is not to put any buildings in that Route 37 right-of-way, but to keep it as parking.
That would then, if the ownership transferred again from this owner to someone else, that would mean that that condition would go along with it, that they couldn't put any vertical improvements in that area.
If that's a condition of the CUP, that would transfer it with the land, yes, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant? I have one. If we're willing to do that, why wouldn't, and you may not be able to answer this, I understand, but why wouldn't we just go ahead and reconfigure this truck staging parking as it is now, and not have that in that right-of-way?
The owner would like the benefit of using that area that's dedicated for the right-of-way or future right-of-way until such time as it's needed for that roadway. So it gives him the use of that portion of his property that he wouldn't otherwise have.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. This is a public hearing. At this time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone that would like to speak before this matter, please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not closed yet. No, just come forward, state your name.
Good evening, all. My name is Richard Bell. I live at 119 Payton Street in the city of Winchester, commercial real estate broker in Winchester, Frederick County. I'm also a property owner in Stonewall Industrial Park. Own and manage about 300,000 square feet of property there. I will disclose I'm also a broker representative of a prior application before you for rezoning for Cheryl Morris. And All I really wanted to bring up was just a request that you give consideration to this conditional use permit, which Mr. Chairman pointed out is a land use decision, that the decisions you are making are the considerations of the rezoning as it relates to traffic, ingress and egress, safety, and all of those other items are taken into consideration on this application as well. This is not a by right. It is a conditional use permit. And while improvements in the future right-of-way that are only gravel may not be problematic to bulldoze out, it may be costly to bulldoze out a long-term lease with the user that will be paying rent for that parking lot. Because I don't think the applicant is the intended user, does not plan to park 82 of his own tractor trailers there. He will be leasing that space out to some user for some extended period of time. So just keep that in consideration and don't think that it's just gravel and it should be no problem. So again, I just ask for your consideration that if a traffic impact analysis is going to be a requirement of the site plan, that would be after the conditional use is granted, and no other conditions in my mind would be allowed to be placed on it, on this use. So it seems a little cart before the horse to do the transportation impact analysis after the conditional use is granted. So again, these are just some things I would point out. I'm not in specific opposition to the conditional use, because I would agree there is a high demand for tractor trailer parking in this market. I've got inquiries right now that could take down 12 to 15 acres if it was available within the next 3 months. So just, again, I'm not opposing this. I just ask that it be treated with due consideration, consistent with the rezoning that's been before you within the last few days. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion, commissioners.
I guess we've already had a lot of our discussion,
We have it that.
but I guess I'm concerned that this could end up being a building instead of a gravel parking lot. I understand the concern about the traffic, but I think there's probably a high probability that most of the tractor trailers parking there are going to be tractor trailers that are already in the industrial park. I don't think they're going to draw tractor trailers in from the outside, so I'm not sure that there's going to be much increase in traffic, or that, if they're driving unsafely in the industrial park now, they're probably going to continue to drive unsafely in the industrial park, so I would assume the owners would take care of that. I am very concerned about the precedent this sets. That's why I would like to see us put something in here that will pass the legal test, but will also make sure it is in compliance with the comprehensive plan. And potentially something, if we don't want to put something in there that says we want it dedicated, maybe if we put something in that the easement will be shown, wording will be put on the site plan that says this area will be dedicated in the future for future Route 37, and no vertical construction improvements will be made in this area. That, I think, brings it pretty much in compliance with the comp plan, because there's nothing in there then that would prohibit the development or even hamper the development of Route 37. I mean, they can come in there and take that gravel out in an instant and continue the construction of Route 37, and we say, if we can put in there that it will be dedicated in the future, doesn't mean it has to be dedicated for free. I'm sure the owner's going to want to be paid for the land, but that may be the best we can get at this point. I think we need to try to do something that keeps a vertical construction project from occurring in there, because that becomes very expensive, and that would probably necessitate a legal fight sometime down in the future that's not productive for anybody. So, and I think we can still look ourselves in the mirror and say, we're consistent with the comp plan, because we're saying this land's future dedicated for future easement for Route 37, no vertical construction. Yes, we are setting a precedent that we're allowing horizontal construction in a right-of-way for Route 37, but maybe that's not a bad thing in other areas either, as long as we can prevent vertical construction from being built that would be an obstruction to constructing Route 37. I don't know what do the other planning commissioners think about that.
Anyone?
Well, I think you're dead on. I mean, there's got to be a use for this land somewhere down the road. And with a site plan, the vertical use, all you have said, I think we'll be in, like you said, closer to the 2035 comp plan.
Thank you. Anyone else? How do we go about that, Mr. Secretary, what Mr. Thomas's suggestion?
I believe the commission may well have been asking for us to work on a condition that we would probably bring back to the Planning Commission at a future meeting. Is that the way I'm hearing that?
I believe so. That's what I'm...
So if there's consensus, in addition to what Mr. Thomas had described there, then staff would be happy to work on that and bring it back to the Planning Commission at a future meeting, obviously, if that's what the Planning Commission ultimately decides with the disposition of this application this evening.
That would give council an opportunity to review the wording in more detail.
Okay. Well, if that is what the pleasure of this commission is, Mr. Unger?
Unless we don't know how to word it right now, I think Mr. Stowe said that. I think that's what you said anyway. So, I mean, if
But it's
we,
not in this document right now, what we have before us, correct?
that's correct.
Do we want to try and craft that wording tonight? Is that what you're saying?
It's up to you guys. I mean, he's done committed, just, that's what he said he'd do.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I mean, I'd prefer that we not try to wordsmith a condition. I mean, I appreciate it. I think the good thing is that there's agreement, to get there. So I think given the importance of the issue, to have the opportunity for that language to be checked out and brought back to us with a, kind of a favorable opinion from the county attorney would be good.
I agree. Thank you, Mr. Moan. And then I'll entertain a motion.
Nobody else has got anything to say? I'll move to postpone for 45 days.
Second.
I have a motion to postpone for 45 days to allow for rewording of the CUP that will be inclusive of Mr. Thomas's comments. Mr. Moan?
Moan, yes?
Dawson, yes.
Wilmot, yes.
Bolden, yes.
Thomas, yes?
Klein, yes.
Yes.
Ambrosi, yes.
Munger, yes.
Chair votes yes. This is postponed. We'll see it in 45 days. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is also a public hearing. It's CPPA number 01-18 for St. Paul on the Hill, land use designation amendment request. This is a request to change the land use designation for one parcel of land that totals 4.971 acres. The property is identified by property identification number 54-A-128 and is located at 1527 Cincinnati Road in the Redbud Magisterial District. The property is located within the SWAZA, the Sewer and Water Area, and the Urban Development Area, the UDA. The property is currently designated in the Cincinnati Eastern Frederick Urban Area Plan of the 2035 Comprehensive Plan for institutional land use with environmental resources. The applicant is requesting to change the current institutional designation to urban center. Ms. Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. With that, I'm going to go straight to the location map on your left. As you can see, the subject property is outlined in black. As you stated, it is currently zoned RP, residential performance. And again, the property is here. You have Cincinnati Road located here, and there's a school in this location. Oops. I'm not sure what I did. It's stuck. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, this is an excerpt from the existing 2035 comprehensive plan. It shows the existing land uses on the property. Again, the subject property outlined in black. And this area, which is the green and pink hatching, is institutional. which represents the existing use of the property, which is the church, and adjacent to it, the school. You have the existing residential in this location, and then the portion of Greenwood Urban Center, which is that circle, the little circle designation. And this is what the applicant is requesting. As you can see, they are requesting that that urban center be bumped out along their property, which is, again, that circled, it's a little difficult to see, but you see that circle designation is what they are requesting to go from the institutional. And this is just a blow-up of the Cincinnati plan. You can see that there's the core of the Greenwood Urban Center, which is this big area here. That subject property is right here. And as you stated earlier, the subject property is zoned RP, residential performance. It has a current by right density of 10 units per acre if you were to develop townhouses or garden apartments. With the 4.9 acres, it is a current by right density of 49 units. Now, expanding the urban center designation to the property would double the by right density from 10 units to 20 units an acre if they develop the high-density residential building. So that density increase, if the property has the urban center, would not be through a rezoning, it would be a by right allowance if the urban center is expanded. So therefore, you have the potential up to 99 units, which is an additional 50 over the possible, and that's just the maximum. Worst case scenario, there are site constraints that would possibly limit that, but just the total overall, the 4.9 times the 20 units an acre. So just where this has been, the Comprehensive Plans and Programs Committee discussed this back at their April meeting. They did recommend approval, and they sent it forward for further discussion by the commission. It came before you at your May 2nd meeting, and it was supported and sent to the Board of Supervisors for discussion. The board discussed this at their May 23rd meeting, and they sent it forward for public hearing. So tonight we are seeking a recommendation from the Planning Commission to forward to the Board of Supervisors on this request. I would be glad to answer any questions, and Mr. Evan Wyatt is here on behalf of the application.
Questions for Ms. Perkins? Anyone? Mr. Thomas?
Candace, would you go back one more?
This one.
Okay, the Greenwood Urban Center there, and would you point out again where this property is located?
Greenwood Urban Center.
And where is this?
Right, that subject property, let me zoom in. The subject property is this area you can see here, just kind of that pinkish area, and then that's that environmental feature that you can see on the map that runs through it. And then the Greenwood Urban Center runs up in this area, and it also stretches along that existing commercial piece adjacent to the property. My art is not very good, so I apologize.
The property across from where the property we're discussing, it appears that that's single-family housing. Is that correct?
There's a number of commercial pieces along with residential. There's a mix of B1 as well as RP. But you can see there is some residential properties across Cincinnati that are within that urban center. But it was expanded up on the top portion to include that B1 area, and it was expanded west to kind of encompass those commercial pieces such as the country store and the bank.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Perkins? Thank you, ma'am. If the applicant is here, they'd like to come forward, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Evan Wyatt with Greenway Engineering, representing the comp plan amendment request. We had a opportunity, I think, at your May 2nd meeting to kind of cover the ground of the project and the development program. But just to remind everybody, what's being proposed is a change in the comprehensive plan to give the property an urban center designation. And to build on Mr. Thomas's comment, yeah, it would be consistent with the land use for the comp plan immediately to the east of us and directly across Cincinnati Road from us. So it would be the same land use designation that is part of the Greenwood Urban Center. You may also recall that when we talked about this, of course, the property is already zoned RP, which Candace discussed. And the kind of quirky thing with this particular project is that the zoning is in place for residential use, but in order to do a multifamily structure type use, you have to be designated urban center by the comp plan. Candace is right that the density of the property by right is 10 units an acre. It's currently developed, as, of course, as a church. But just to make sure we're all clear, the urban center designation would allow for a density increase, but specifically only for a multifamily structure. In other words, it would not give a double density for the by right uses such as townhouses or garden apartments or things like that. The comp plan amendment is strictly to be able to do the multifamily structure. Now, you also may recall that when we spoke about this, we talked about St. Paul's and their vision as a mission church, which was to provide an opportunity for elderly income affordable housing in the community. And as part of that, it's really more of a mixed-use project because the church would remain on the property and be attached to the new multifamily structure. This is really an interesting and unique opportunity because this does provide an opportunity for this population of our community that the development community would not otherwise provide, and the reason very simply is because there's no profit in this type of project. The way that it's being positioned is the partnership is between St. Paul's and Virginia Diocese, which owns the land, and then Wesley Housing Development, which is a nonprofit whose existence is to provide this sort of housing, and they finance it through the low-income tax credit program. So this is, once again, kind of a unique opportunity to take the strengths of two groups working in partnership to provide an opportunity for the community that really otherwise would not be available to us. It's really unfortunate that the comp plan quirky thing has to be overcome, but that's very simply what we're attempting to do. So that's kind of where we discussed at the discussion item. And as Candace said, we talked about this at the board. There were some questions, but at the end of the discussion, the board deemed this to be appropriate to forward for public hearing, and that's what's before you tonight. And so I guess at that point, I'll be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
Thank you. Questions? Mr. Thomas?
The intent is to build age-restricted, low-income housing, is that correct?
Yeah, the technical term is elderly income affordable housing, and the reason I make that difference, Mr. Thomas, is because this, even though it's elderly housing, it would not necessarily be qualified for anybody that was of a certain age, okay? In other words, the way the financing and the way the partnership and the way the program works, it is to provide elderly affordable income housing. So in order to qualify to live in the facility, you have to be 40%, your maximum income can only be 40% of the average mean income for the community. So let's assume that that number was $40,000. So what that would mean would be that if my math is correct, you could only be $60,000 or $26,000 or under to qualify to live here. The facility that is being proposed to be developed would be owned and operated by Wesley Housing. They would have a ground lease agreement with St. Paul's because St. Paul's would still own the property, but Wesley would be, they would finance, they would develop, they would manage, they would accommodate programming for the residents of the facility, and St. Paul's, of course, would still continue there as a church.
Is the intent to have school-age children there, or is it just that it would be, that's why I guess I'm getting confused with age-restricted and elderly.
Yes.
I mean, elderly is kind of a state of mind. It's not related to a number, but age-restricted is related to a number, so.
Right. The projects that Wesley has developed, the average age of the residents is in the high 60s to low 70s of age. I've been told that the projects that they have developed in and around the state are 100% elderly, no school children. The facility itself is going to be 70 units. 59 of them would be one bedroom, and then the other 11 would have two. And the idea of the two-bedroom is if an elderly resident did require a caregiver to come in for whatever reason, it would give the caregiver a room. But for the most part, they're one bedroom. So obviously, that's a deterrent for families and children and things of that nature.
If the urban center designation would go forward, is there any, what assurance does the county have that we end up with low-income elderly housing there, 70 units?
Sure. The assurance the county has, obviously, is the trust in St. Paul's that the ground lease that will be provided sets forth that. They have told me it's okay to, for the portions of the ground lease that would be relevant to this discussion. There always has to be kind of a date, if you will, but the initial ground lease between them and Wesley Housing would be an initial term of 99 years, and that it would be also, the ground lease would be to provide affordable senior rental building containing at least 70 units. Of course, at the end of the 99 years, there would be renewal options and things of that nature, but any lease has to have a term limit, but they felt that 100 years was a sign of good faith that what they're doing is what they say they're going to do and continue to do.
You're really putting us in a conundrum, because if for some reason we would disagree with this, you're saying that we don't trust the church. Kind of is a bad place to be.
If this was a project where the church was vacating the premises and the idea was to tear down the church and just to build anew, I might give you a little bit of, okay, I understand the concern, but with the church being there, with the diocese owning the land under the facility, and with the partnership and the agreement to require this to be the use of the property, I think that's a pretty solid indication that this is going to be what it is. The other thing I think you really have to keep in mind is, because we could obviously play the what-if scenario, but what is the worst case outcome, and does the finances of a developer going in there, offering to remove the church, build them a new church somewhere else, relocate them and build a building that could have up to 98 units, would all that be cost affordable to the developer? And the answer is no. So you could, once again, you can do the what ifs, but I think with this one, I think we're all on pretty good ground.
Is there any way the county could get some kind of an assurance? I mean, you're pretty familiar with the planning system around here and the zonings and all that.
The discussions since the board, because the board asked a similar question, the discussions with the development of the ground lease would be that the parties would definitely be willing to establish a documented MOU that could even be, legally recorded, so it tied with the title to the property, chain of title to the property. So I think that's out there and available. And so once again, I think that's probably the path we would follow if that was, if that was the concern of the board, that they really wanted something to be put on the record. I think that would certainly be doable.
Thank you. That's all my questions.
Mr. Rhodes?
The what-ifs, the trust, I guess you wouldn't be asking if we hadn't been burned in the past by other developments along this lines that you were told it was age restricted, then single family comes in like a fairly large development to the south. So I think if there was a recorded, say, covenant that the county was a party to that said elderly, low income, that would take all the guesswork out of it, clean it up, and I wouldn't have a problem with it. But otherwise, the county really has no way to do anything if it decided to go single-family in the future, or family below elderly with school kids.
Once again, the property is already zoned and could be developed for multiple residential uses by right.
Yeah.
The whole reason we're even having the discussion is because there's the need for the multifamily structure to accommodate this population. If this could have been done in a garden apartment kind of flavor, if you will, we would have just been filing a site plan. It's strictly to have the right facility for the population it's going to serve.
Like I said, think just a legal document that states exactly what your intentions are, and that leaves all the concerns of trust and what-ifs and everything else, and it cleans it up quite a bit.
The other thing to remember with the trust is St. Paul's is certainly the trustee, but the Diocese of Virginia owns the property. So there's a lot of blessings, if you will, that would have to occur before the property could be sold outright to somebody.
I understand, but again, county will be no party to any of that.
And get back to Mr. Thomas's point, I think you're going to have to trust the church that they're going to do what they say they're going to do.
And not be willing to just do a simple document. All right?
Mr. Moe?
This is, Mr. Wyatt, this is just a question for clarification. I mean, it is a unique situation in that it's already zoned, and that a comp plan designation or a comp plan change has, an impact on the by right density. So that's a unique thing. But I think it's also important to point out, if you look across the street, now it's a lot of subdivided lots, but there's an awful lot of RP zone land right across the street with the same designation on it. So, it's all a question of, the pressures and the dynamics of the marketplace. And I think that at 50 units, if there was a real interest or focused interest in trying to sell that ground for some other purpose, it could happen. I mean, there would be an opportunity for that, but that's not really my point with what I'm trying to say here. I just wanted to ask the question, because it is a concern about the by right. This is more for the history of this for me than anything else. Had the discussion happened at all about, just a proffer only or an exclusively proffer type of rezoning application that would just deal with that use issue, or is that something that just based on the process you all opted to forego?
Well, let me answer your question in two parts. So the first part is the proffer to establish an age-restricted multifamily project, okay? When you look at the county code, what it does say is that for an age-restricted multifamily building, it requires 100-foot side yard setbacks. Our property's 250 feet wide, so rezoning it to an age-restricted multifamily would, in essence, render the property useless for development. So the opportunity to do a multifamily for this particular property really leans more towards the conventional multifamily, which is why this is a little odd, if you will. I think so that's the land use kind of argument about why would you proffer yourself into a situation you can't develop. Now, the other side is the fact that with low-income financing tax credit programs, in order for Wesley Housing to submit the application for financing, they have to have a letter from the county basically saying the land is allowed, the land use is permissible, okay? So the comp plan amendment, which then, since the zoning was already in place, gave us the ability to do the right multifamily building that could be developed, seemed to be the best path to get there, so financing could be applied for, this year to start the ball rolling for construction next year. So there's really two answers to your question. One is what you can do by ordinance, and then number two, the ability to achieve financing with the county endorsing that the land use was permissible. So once again, I understand it's a little odd, but with this particular group that's with me and has shown good faith that they're, going through the county process to do what the mission of the church is trying to achieve, I really think we're okay.
I just have one follow-up question with the tax credits. What's the timeframe or the deadline for Wesley to be in the cycle for this year's?
The formal application is due in March of next year. They have to, of course, do more than just what we're all working on now with the land use entitlement piece. And the track we were on now, which got us to presumably a board public hearing in July, seemed to be the right fit, which is why when we discussed this with Supervisor Dunn after the town hall meeting that he sponsored and other community outreach meetings we had, he was comfortable sponsoring this as a special exception instead of in the normal comp plan cycle.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just one, Evan. If I think I'm hearing you right, the reason you can't put some kind of an age restriction on this is because you'd have to go to a different zoning. You don't have the setbacks to do that. Is that correct?
The zoning would not change. The RP zoning is the correct zoning for a multifamily structure. The multifamily structure ordinance comes in basically two choices. One is what I would call a conventional structure. The other is what's called an age-restricted. The age-restricted has more significant setbacks that would then not allow us to develop the property because we couldn't fit the facility on there.
And you understand where everybody's coming from. If it did get sold or get developed to where there was 2 or 3 kids per unit, and that probably won't happen, but if it did, there's nothing there to pay for any of that. And, I know you understand that.
I certainly do, but this is, once again, where you do the what-if scenario kind of thing. And after the fact, if the property gets developed the way that St. Paul's and Wesley are attempting to, then the other question you have to ask is 100 years down the road when the ground lease would theoretically expire, what is the potential of somebody wanting to buy the building that only has 1-bedroom units predominantly and then try to sell that market rate to families of children? So
I'm in the favor of you doing it. I just don't want a bunch of kids in there that was not.
Well, St. Paul's, once again, I think has the controlling factor in making sure that what we're representing gets done.
Anyone else? Evan, I just got a couple things. And I understand that we all like to go on faith, but I still have a hard time with that one. And I know that you're reluctant to answer us on that. And people move on, things happen. And to not have something in there, we're making a comp plan amendment. I've heard what you said about why you didn't go through the rezoning process. I've got that, and I still think that was probably the way this should have went. I understand the tax credits and what have you, but everyone seems to, if we can't have some assurances that this will stay that, people change. These people at the church are good, fine people, I assure you. I grant you that. But business decisions get made. Tough business decisions get made. Land leases become bought out. Things change. And I think what you're hearing from the commissioners is we'd like to see a little bit more where if we're making a change to the comp plan is what we're doing. And we're increasing the density. What's the next project down the road? How far would this go? We're outside the urban area with this. And the comprehensive plan that the staff has put together and we've worked with, the previous applicant in here, we're preaching to them comp plan. And I still think at the end of the day, we would all like to see more assurances in something that's got a little more than just faith. And you're all not willing to do that.
The only thing I can offer is that the rezoning is creating a scenario that I have an undevelopable property. So why would I do that?
Sometimes there is undeveloped property. That happens.
But why would I petition the county to rezone a piece of property that then I could otherwise not make use of?
Granted.
So this is, like I said, a unique animal. We have been very forthcoming with what the plan is going to be, and it's unfortunate that there is a nuance in the zoning ordinance that ties the RP zoning back to the comp plan for multifamily, but that's the housing product type we need for the population that they desire to serve. If not, we would not be talking about anything because they would be otherwise able to develop the property if that opportunity came around for other uses.
Okay. Let me get Mr. Oates first.
Evan, I agree. I don't think a rezoning is the right route to go. I wouldn't advise them if they were my client of that also, but I think a simple covenant requires no public hearings. Something can be drafted up, legal looks at it, recorded, and assures the county that it will be elderly, low-income housing, period. And that simplifies everything and takes all doubts out of everybody's mind.
Did I misunderstand you? I guess I'm hearing two answers, I think. I thought when we talked that you said that the applicant would be willing to enter into an MOU with the county where they would say it was going to be low-income elderly housing, 70 units. Did you not say that?
I did say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does the county accept that as a viable legal document that's enforceable?
The county has not historically done that and has not expressed any willingness to do so at this point. The county, the attorney's review and position on this one was that, of course, the proffer would be the only legal recourse that the county would have in evaluating something like this land use through a rezoning. So again, that's been something the county has not been involved with regards to a development project in the past. And as the discussion was initiated on this one, there was a reluctance to do so. Now, where that ultimately goes, should it move forward, I think that decision is going to have to be made. But there's been a reluctance to do so, to involve the county in such an agreement. And when we have the mechanism, and that's through the proffered rezoning, which would provide a proffer that does the very same restriction.
But if they did a proffered rezoning, they have the setbacks that they then couldn't use the property. Is that
right?
I think that's not quite correct because, while it's quite convoluted, the age-restricted multifamily housing is a larger building that you can do with an age restriction. But the multifamily residential building is still a particular housing type that they would be able to do in an area designated as an urban center. Simply the fact that the property has an age restriction to a proffer would not necessarily preclude them from doing the multifamily residential building, which is different from the age-restricted multifamily housing, as mentioned in this case with regards to some setbacks and things of that nature. So I hadn't really looked at that in any great detail, but that would be one of the nuances, if you will, that within this area, it would not have to be a specifically age-restricted multifamily housing type because the multifamily residential building may be a housing type they could choose. We would have an underlying guarantee through the proffers, if you will, that this is an age-restricted property. So on the fly, it's maybe seem quite convoluted, but that might be an opportunity that would allow the development of this housing type through a proffered rezoning scenario. Sorry.
Thank you. So we got that? Any questions? Any further questions?
Just a comment. I think I've never seen anything like this here before, and I know the county doesn't work off a trust, but with who we're dealing with here, and if we can't show some kind of remorse for trust, and Evan, I've never seen him bring anything in here that he didn't do what he said he was gonna do, so as much as I wanted it to be some kind of restriction, I'd have to play along with him.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. No one else has any questions for Mr. Wyatt? Thank you. This time, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone who wants to come forward to speak to this matter can please come forward, come to the microphone. They're more than welcome. Okay. Please come forward. I think we know who you are, but if you would please state your name.
My name is Blaine Dunn. I live in Redbud. I'll just have a couple comments on clarification. St. Paul's came to me in January with a project that I thought was good. I'm empathetic to Mr. Wyatt's concerns on the rezoning that would cause for a 100-foot setback. I understand that in a normal situation, it would be 35 feet, 50 feet. So I'm empathetic to that. I think the project, as described by St. Paul's, is a worthy project. Some of the concerns, though, that have been addressed here, are something that you have to address. I've spoken to some of you before, and I'm really looking for your input and your wisdom on the issue. So if there's a way to accomplish what we all want to accomplish in a legal manner that helps the county and helps St. Paul's, I think the county as a whole wins. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
Question for staff.
And we have a question from Mr. Thomas for staff.
What are our options tonight with this? I'm not sure have we ever tabled or postponed a comp plan revision?
I'm not sure of a particular name, but it's not out of the question to postpone it if you have concerns about it. But yeah, your option would be to postpone it to a later date to have additional time to think about it. You could send it forward to the Board of Supervisors with a positive or negative recommendation, or you could send it forward with a positive recommendation, but you feel the applicant should look into addressing your comments.
And there is no way to put any kind of conditions or restrictions on a comp plan revision?
Not without a rezoning, no.
Okay. Mr. Oates?
If you're leaning towards a postponement, I think requesting staff and county attorney to, I guess, give us some options of what legally can be done, what can't be done, and hopefully they can work it out with the applicant.
I'd really like to try to find a way to approve this.
I understand.
But to protect the county. I mean, certainly I trust the church, but, I've seen empty church buildings in the past. And if the building goes empty and they sell the property, I mean, the diocese isn't going to sit around with an empty property. If you have 100 units there, you could potentially end up with 160 children if they have the right to build 100 units, 1.6 children per unit. That's a lot of traffic. That's a lot of children for the school. That's 25% of an elementary school. That's a tough pill to swallow. And I certainly don't want to appear to not trust the diocese or the church, but, people change sometimes. I would just like to have a little more assurance to protect county residents.
Yeah, I have no issue with the concept moving forward. It's just that protection, giving the county some say in what happens in the future.
Are we asking then for direction from staff? Is that what your question was, Mr. Thomas? Or do we stay with where we're at, Mr. Ruddy, and say we've got our information? Is there a reason for postponement other than we try to work out additional wording? Because
I was hoping the wise heads of the council and the staff could come up with a solution.
I would hope that everybody could come up with a solution. The question would be, do you want to bring that back in front of the Planning Commission, or are you comfortable identifying that issue and moving it forward to the Board of Supervisors? And I feel that's probably a decision of the commission.
I think that's kind of us dumping the problem on the board without our input, and I'd rather not do that unless the board wants that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I would agree with you, Mr. Thomas, but
I'd rather send this forward with an affirmative vote.
True.
but we still don't have the assurance. How are we going to do that?
If we postpone it for 45 days and ask the county attorney's office with staff and the applicant to try to come up with a solution, whether it's an MOU that everybody thinks will pass muster or some other plan that protects the county, that we will have age-restricted elderly housing there, 70 units, that's what I would be looking for.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think I got a sense for where everybody is more or less, on this. I think, for me, coming into tonight's meeting, not much has changed for me from when we considered this at the Comp Plan Committee, and the Comp Plan Committee was comfortable with this as a land use item. That's not to say that there aren't potential unintended consequences because of the way the zoning, in this case, and the land use, kind of line up. In most cases, we do a land use change, and then there's going to be a rezoning, coming eventually. So I completely understand the concerns that are there on some level, and I'm not, I don't like to dump stuff on the board necessarily, but I also view some of the concerns essentially as being, they're fiscal concerns, and those are definitely concerns that are in the, in the bailiwick of the board. They're concerns for us too, and I don't think we should not tend to them, and I think we should be comfortable about the assurances that we get. But on some level, I was comfortable sending this forward, to the board with a positive recommendation on the land use, with it being between the board, the county attorney, and the applicant to figure out what the right mechanism would be to provide whatever assurance the board needs before they would adopt this, recognizing what the density would be. But at the same time, I'm not going to put a motion out for it to, flounder or fail. So, with that being said, unless there's any other discussion, anybody want to back me up on stuff? Nothing? Nobody? Okay, good. Well, I'd like to move that we table the CPPA application for St. Paul's on the Hill Comprehensive,
We'll change the word to postpone from table.
sorry about that.
Okay.
We'll postpone the CPPA application for St. Paul's on the Hill for a period of 45 days.
I have a motion for postponement for 45 days. The reason for the postponement would be to work out an agreement to see if the staff and applicant can work out an agreement that would calm some of the issues that's been brought forward tonight. So I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Time to vote. Mr. Unger.
Unger, no.
Ambrosi, yes.
Manuel, no.
Klein, yes.
Votes yes.
Thomas, yes?
Molden, yes.
Wilmot, yes.
Dawson, yes.
Moan, yes.
Kenny, yes. So the motion is postponed. We'll see it back in 45 days. There's no other items on our agenda, and I believe our next meeting is,
4th of July.
no, I think it's canceled, actually. It's not until the end of July, I believe, is when it is. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion, the meeting is adjourned.